How prejudice, greed, and desperation created a trail of tears. During your childhood, how many of you have been told about our early forefathers and the leaders of our country? The teachers will tell you about their courage, their integrity, and their valor in battle. One of the best examples of this would have to be George Washington. He was a fatherly patriot who, according to Wimm's book, Life and Memorable Actions of George Washington, could not tell a lie. All of these tales builds a sense of faith in your political leaders. You begin to believe that all politicians are trustworthy and credible and have the highest loyalty to the republic and the people and citizens within it. In the next few minutes, we're going to uncover how some of the highest political leaders in our country have misused their positions of power, acted out their hatred toward an entire race of people. This is a true story about a president who had fallen early in his presidency had fallen, lost his popularity with his voters due to some controversial and unpopular decisions he made. In his desperation to recover his popularity or his voters' backing, along with a corrupt governor and state leaders, he was convinced to draw up and pass an Indian removal act and laws that would make it illegal for the eastern Indians to live in the southern United States, anywhere east of the Mississippi River. He was convinced that this would help him garner his support back. The truth is that our leaders have to be watched and monitored. The great power that we've entrusted them with, they can quickly erode our rights, take away our basic rights and freedoms. During this speech, see if you recognize or if you can think of government overreach and misuse of power that's happened during our lifetimes and with administrations even to today. The relevance of this is that you can just watch the news weekly, monthly, and see that every time we turn around, we're having more corruption and overreach uncovered by our political leaders. Some is all the way to the very top, to the White House. This speech exposes how political officials, motivated by different reasons, can make decisions and can permanently damage and alter lives of people who they are sworn to defend and protect. After the passage of these acts and treaties, we will uncover stories of horrible suffering and death endured by the American Indian in their forced removal. On a lighter note, during one of our country's worst cases of human cruelty, two young people have a chance encounter and fall in love, and this actually gives me a personal connection to the Cherokees' plight and to the Indian Removal Act of 1830. So let's get right into it. When attending school as a young child in Middle Tennessee, we learned about the great leaders of our country, especially the ones from our home state. One of the most famous, according to Nestor's book, The Age of Jackson and the Art of the American Power, was Andrew Jackson. He was a military leader, a senator, a congressman, a resident of Tennessee, who became president in 1829, the seventh president. He is best known for his victories over the English in the Battle of New Orleans. According to Nestor, book The Age of Jackson and the Art of the American Power. Jackson, a rugged, tough man, was said to be as tough as hickory wood. He was once shot in the arm during a battle, and he refused to let the surgeons amputate his arm. The men serving under him at the time nicknamed him Old Hickory. Jackson, his 1,100-acre estate, is named the Hermitage. It's in a town of Old Hickory just east of Nashville in Tennessee. When I was in the 5th grade, we took a school trip there, and the tour guide tells you about all his accomplishments, his his most famous speeches and quotes, and his victories in battle, but they don't tell you anything about his animosity toward the American Indian. The U.S. History book by Corbett, Jansen, Lund, P. Fontenelle, Vickery, Waskerwitz, the textbook U.S. History, states that Jackson fought in some of the cruelest and bloodiest battles in his career against American Indians. He fought against the Creek Indian tribe in 1813 and the Seminole in 1817. It is reported by Corbett and Jensen, Lund, P. Fontenelle, Vickery, and Waskerwitz in their U.S. history book that he harbored animosity toward the American Indians due to the cruelty and savagery he witnessed in these two battles. His knowledge of Jackson's desperation to regain his support for his voters spread to the public. The politician in Georgia had realized that the traditional Cherokee lands in northeastern Georgia were some of the most fertile and richest in their state and was perfect for growing cotton, which at the time was the cash crop. Cotton was king. They had also discovered that there was deposits of gold under these Cherokee lands. The Georgia government had been searching for a way to evict the Native American, the Cherokees and the other Native American tribes off of their lands so they could exploit the riches within it and underneath it. The Georgia politicians capitalized on Jackson's desperation and convinced him that creating and passing Indian removal acts and laws would bolster his support, especially in the southern states. So in 1830, Andrew Jackson fathered and drew up what is called the Indian Removal Act of 1830. And on May 28, 1830, he signed it into law. This gave the president the right to negotiate the terms of the treaty with the 5 civilized tribes of the eastern United States, southeastern United States. They were the Chickasaw, the Choctaw, the Muskie Creek, the Seminole, and the original Cherokee Nation. This act, in a nutshell, made it illegal for any Eastern Indians to live east of the Mississippi River in the southern United States. According to Nestor, The Age of Jackson, The Art of the American Power, by the end of Jackson's presidency, his administration had either assisted in or drawn up 70 Indian removal treaties. They had relocated over 50,000 Eastern Indians to the west of the Mississippi to what is now modern-day Oklahoma. The most well-known treaty, the Treaty of Echota, forced the Cherokees living in Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Alabama to be relocated to the Indian territories in Oklahoma as well. Many of the Cherokees refused to leave, and the government authorized the use of the military to forcefully move them from their homes. And many of them were forced to walk, have as many as 1,000 miles over a 4-month period along this trail. The route they took them across Georgia, Tennessee, Arkansas, and into Oklahoma. As many as 4,000 of the 16,000 Cherokee Indians would perish along the way, this giving it its name as the Trail of Tears. Several years ago, I was visiting with my mother after the passing of her sister, and we were looking at some old family photos. And I commented to my mom that I'd never noticed that some of our family have physical features of American Indians. My mother goes on to tell me that my great-grandmother was Cherokee Indian and full-blooded 100% Cherokee Indian. While after discovering this, me and my wife actually traveled to the Cherokee Reservation in Cherokee, North Carolina, and was just studying and researching what we could find out about our history, and discovered that Andrew Jackson was basically the brainchild and father of these removal acts that in turn forced my great-grandmother's distant family to move from Georgia and North Carolina west to Oklahoma. During this move, on this route, my great-grandmother's family escaped and was hiding in rural Tennessee, and she had a chance encounter with what would eventually become my great-grandfather. They met along this route and were eventually married. In conclusion, the actions of the 7th President in the creation of the Indian Removal Act proof that he was a man looking for political power and garner support for the southern states. He blatantly acted out his hatred toward the American Indian and assisted the state of Georgia in the appropriation of the lands belonging to the Cherokee and several other tribes, all into exploit the economic profit from their lands and the gold that was underneath those lands. This horrible act altered the traditions and the way of life of hundreds, thousands of Indians, and cost many of them their lives. The path that the Indians forced to walk, known as the Trail of Tears, where over 4,000 of them perished along this 1,000-mile route they were forced to walk, according to Corbett, Jensen, Lund, P. Fastenal, Vickery, and Weskerowitz on the textbook of U.S. history. In closing, this is a warning. We must all stay involved in the political process. Never turn a blind eye to our politicians that we elect and send to Washington to represent us. Someone as popular and powerful as a president acting out his hatred against a whole race of people can cause terrible acts of humanity. On a positive note, most people tell you that history was their least favorite subject in school. But as you can see, that by me being history is my hobby, American history, I was able to discover that if it had not been for Indian Relocation Act, my great-grandparents would have never met. So I challenge you to get involved in your family history. Take your children, your grandchildren, and study your city history, the history right in your city, in your state. Take your kids, your grandkids to the library, online, and study the history that surrounds you, that's right in your own backyard. When you're traveling up and down the interstate and the highways and you see those brown signs indicating a historical site, make time to stop in there and visit these sites. Let your children study these sites, and then go and visit these sites and let it come to life and let them see these places and learn of our history. The fact is that by researching one of the most horrible events in American history, you may be like me and discover that the man on the $20 bill was directly responsible for your great-grandparents meeting and getting married.